everybody, and welcome to another video. So, with the end of the year in sight, Happy New Year's Eve, by the way, I thought it'd be really fun to talk about some cool stuff I'd like to see in Guild Wars 2 coming next year, or frankly beyond at any point really. So we're well into mini X packs now. We're 2.5 deep. The expectation is there'll be another one this summer, and then hopefully they continue along with it after that as well. And we've seen that mini X packs do have at least a little space for system improvements and obviously new content features too. Secrets of the Obscure had the Wizard's Vault. Gw2 Wilds had the homesteads, and namely the big decoration improvements. You could also include World vs. World Alliances in there too, depending on your perspective about its long development. And there are obviously constant smaller things as well, like changing character select screens, randomizers, the PvP tournament improvements. You know, some of this comes into late End of Dragons, but still the point is the game can get these little feature improvements, and the obvious question then is, what do we want to see? So for me personally, I was pretty heavily lapsed during the Secrets of the Obscure era. This time last year during the Nios patches, I was not playing very much, but post Gw2 Wilds, I've really got a lot back into it, and I'm kind of like full and buzzing with ideas. So let's put them down. I got a few, and we'll just run through the list, see what we think, and I'd love to see what you guys think in the comments as well as we go along. By the way, to be clear, for this video, I'm not talking so much about content stuff. I don't mean new mounts, or playable races, or elite specs returning, or maps, or new weapons, or, you know, content-heavy things, like, say, even the homestead, really. We can obviously assume that stuff's coming, and frankly, I think whatever they pick will be pretty good. I mean, the devil's in the details, and it's kind of hard to guess what that's all going to be before we even have a sign of an announcement. So for stuff like that, it comes down to just how they implement it. What I want to talk about is, like, feature pack style stuff. Remember when we had feature packs around Season 1? Game improvements. So yeah, let's jump through what's on my list. Number one, and this is in no particular order, by the way. Number one, I want to talk about achievement points. So, first of all, I love achievements. I love achievement points in general in Guild Wars 2. I basically think, and I've thought this for years and years and years now, I think if you're not invested in achievements, like on any level with Guild Wars, then you're missing out. The game's going to be really unsatisfying because huge swathes of the content that Arenanet provide is kind of only led to you if you're looking at achievements, or only feels worthwhile if you're looking at achievements. Now take any Living World patch, particularly, I mean, for those of you who are around for this time, around Season 1 and 2, there was a huge reputation with the game that it just didn't have enough content. You just jump in, you play the story for like an hour or two, and there's nothing else. But that wasn't true, really. If you were playing the achievements, suddenly a patch would take, you know, like 10 hours, 20 hours, or even more. And I don't just mean like boring grind. There can be boring grind with achievements, don't get me wrong, but usually a good range of things to do. Achievements encourage you to look at the crafting materials and unlocks available. They point you at events you didn't know about, and even, you know, especially nowadays, they act as full voice-acted quests and tell stories of their own. It's all going to just bundled in there together in an unsatisfying way, but if you can get invested, then you get a lot more out of Guild Wars. So basically, I would like more people to reasonably invested in achievement points, and I'd like some kind of like feature style update here. There are two levels to it. First, there's caring about going for like the meta achievement for each patch or each story step or whatever. Now this is a good one for even fairly casual people. If you do the meta achievement, you can pick which other you know, lesser achievements you go for as you build it up, and they usually give you a pretty good reward. You know, maybe a piece of ascended gear you care about in past years. That's not so much true with the armory now. But you know, maybe a cool skin, an armor piece, a backpack, something like that. I still feel that the meta achievements are generally worthwhile, and we've seen with mini X packs as well, they do like for Secrets of the Obscure, they had the meta, where if you get all the meta achievements across all the patches throughout Secrets of the Obscure, then you got one big final reward, and that was the Wayfinder title. And I think that's pretty good, actually. As we saw in Season 3 and 4, there was a big connection to legendary accessories, and I think those were some of the all-time best patches they ever did. Remember at the end of Season 3, where it's like, oh, you can get Aurora now if you go through and you do the achievements and you really look at the season, which you might have not have done otherwise. That got a lot of playtime out of me, really exploded the population of those maps, and just felt like a badass, brilliant period for the game. So the more that Arenanet do stuff like that, the better. That's meta achievements. The other thing is the idea of AP itself. And AP itself, I think, is a lot less palatable to people and not really so interesting. Of course, if you've always been going for it, it's fun. You know, I very often get messages of people saying, well, hey, congrats on getting to this AP threshold, or people in a squad chat will comment to one another about how many people have a lot of AP, or if you have very, very low AP, then people will actually, you know, appreciate that you're a new player and they'll talk to you a little bit more carefully and, you know, they'll help each other out. So I think there definitely is something good about the system, and I like the way that you kind of get to invest in it because it's something everyone can see when they're in game. You know, there are other things you can invest in, but you kind of have to look at websites like Guild Wars 2 efficiency, and not everyone's on them or really cares. This is a nice, big, bold, evident thing. But the thing is, if you haven't been into it in the past, like, and I think this is the vast majority of players, you're going to be too behind to ever really care. Like, it would be a Herculean effort to take a new account today and get it like above the 40k threshold or towards the 50k, which is kind of what most, you know, very, very veteran accounts are at now. We're literally talking about over a decade of MMO gameplay with a huge amount of different things. A lot of like prices of items and skins are out of whack now. Like, you're just behind. Look at things like time-gated achievement points from festival AP. You know, isn't that set up that it takes at least a decade of doing every single festival to get a good amount of AP from it? And some people are genuinely years ahead of you. That's not satisfying at all. I've personally been on a bit of a weird experience with AP myself as well. I fell completely out of love with building points years ago now, probably around Dragonstorm. And I know that Dragonstorm was a controversial patch for a lot of reasons, but the achievement point side of it really is just, it was a brutal one for AP. It was a very grindy, very slow patch, had a lot to do, and you kind of had to repeat a lot of the missions. To this day, I haven't actually finished all the Dragonstorm stuff. So I kind of wobbled with it. And then, you know, when End of Dragons came out, I still wasn't too invested because I felt like I wasn't on top of things. And then Secrets of the Obscure was a little bit iffy. I've only really been recaptured by it now with Gw2 Wilds because it structured things quite well, I think. I found my feet in these past 6 months, and it's dawned on me just how much content I was missing from not only this mini-X pack, but last year's one too. I'd love people to have that experience as well. I'd love people to recognize, oh, there is actually quite a lot here, but it all kind of requires giving a shit about AP. So what practically would I like to see Arenanet do? First, I want to see more development on what we saw with Gw2 Wilds, where we have those lore-heavy storylines that are achievements, I'm going to say in air quotes, but they're not really achievements. What they are is side quests, okay? They're traditional quests, really. They should not be buried in achievements. In Gw2 Wilds, they did separate them into their own thing called side stories. That's good, but let's keep going. I think that they should have their own button on the hero panel, just like how crafting has its own button, how personal story has its own button, hero points do. There should be a thing that basically says quests. I mean, you can name it whatever you want, but that's where they should be. The confusion of hiding meaningful content in a giant grid matrix of different achievements just sucks. And while they're at it, by the way, I think collections aren't really achievements either. I would pull collections out into their own dedicated button, just like personal story and your build templates and your equipment and all of that. They're not the same thing. And the community confusion and conflation between quests and achievements and collections and suggesting they're kind of all the same sort of thing all the time really damages the game's reputation. I want to move past this. Second, I think the other big thing that Arenanet should look at is the achievement points reward track. Remember, this actually came in with a feature pack back in Season 1, and as far as I can remember, they've never actually tweaked it or changed it. This is over 10 years old now. You know, the big track at the top where you hit various AP thresholds and you get additional rewards. I've been thinking about this one a lot myself as I climb towards 50k, and you know, it's kind of a milestone because you get a huge amount of gems with it. You get a whole new title. You know, every 10k is a big moment. But even still, at these big thresholds, it's still kind of meh. I think most of the rewards you get, especially as you climb higher, are out of date. There aren't skins for after pinnacle weapons, and you know, the actual appearance of the achievement point track weapons don't look very great. Remember years ago when they did a patch to improve the visuals of various legendaries? Like they updated the Meteorologicus footprints, and in fact I think all the Gen 1s had a huge coat of paint over them. I'd love to see that for the AP weapons that you can get, and to be honest, there need to be some more as well. Same with Hellfire and Radiant armor. I haven't had any armor to work on in my achievement points track for like years and years and years now. The priority I think should be on rewards for the earlier stuff, not necessarily the later stuff, because there are so few players, you know, past the point where they're no longer getting Hellfire or Radiant things. But that moment where you get an achievement point threshold and you get a new skin and you get to choose this one or that one, that's really fun, and unfortunately that's just kind of disappeared in recent years. And so many other rewards are just out of date. No one wants a single jug of karma when they're like into 30k AP plus, hell, even 10k plus. No one really cares that much about boxes of fun. It's just like inventory clutter. I would love Arenanet to take a pass at these, put a couple of new skins in there, and importantly, improve the previous ones too. Look at the crazy stuff you get on the gem store nowadays. Please, really, pinnacle weapons and zenith weapons, they should look a bit better than they do. And maybe a collection for getting them all or something, I don't know. There's also the question of just like raw currency. See, the achievement point reward track does do something really epic and cool that nothing else in the game does, and that's it gives you gems. For in-game rewards, this is the thing that gives you gems, which is kind of mad, really. I don't know whether there's more wiggle room for that now to add more or distribute them a little bit differently. I'd love if Arenanet could take a look at that. I always will stand out in my mind years ago when they added that 2 gold reward to dailies, and they determined it was fine, it wasn't going to be a huge issue for the economy or whatever, and that simple little 2 gold made logging in and doing your dailies and stuff feel so much better. An equivalent sort of experience, but for the AP reward track, would be a 10 out of 10 for me. And beyond that, you know, just improve the UI. Can we at least scroll it left and right, see what there is up further ahead? You know, maybe make it look a little bit more tantalizing and fancier for people. Third and finally, on the matter of achievement points, and talking about adding fresh coats of paint to thing, I want to talk about this thing here. I'll put a screenshot of it. I'm going to call it the player card. So I'm referring here to the fancy square tooltip that pops up when you mouse over a player in your party, in your friends list, in your guild, or whatever. It gives people some basic stats about your account, and namely your achievement point total. This is the main UI we have to display our AP to each other. It's actually a really cool space for players to express themselves, I think, if it had a little bit of customization on it. So what I think, first of all, we should be able to do with this is put titles on there. And by that, I mean titles of our choosing that are separate from the one that we have displaying under our character name. So recently we saw Arenanet add colored titles to the game, which I think was a great move. I'd been advocating for that for years. It was so awesome to see it there. But there are just so many titles now. What if I have one of those really fancy gold titles from like a money sink objective, you know, like when you get all of the Aurene legendary weapons or whatever, or if you buy the golden ticket in the Wizard's Tower. Maybe I want to display that, but maybe I have a colored thing from World vs. World. Maybe I have a really tough raiding achievement. Maybe I have something, yeah, that I care about, like, for the roleplay, something I have a personal attachment to. We can only kind of display one title. If we could put titles on the player card, so when someone mouses over and they're looking at each other's AP or whatever, you can also see some of people's most proud accomplishments listed there. Suddenly, titles become a lot more interesting to go for across the whole game, and a bunch of other achievements now are interesting to us. So the question is, how many titles should we be able to put on the player card? Too many, obviously it's just going to look like a ridiculous list, and no one's going to want to read that. I think somewhere in the ballpark of 3 to 5. Perhaps you actually unlock slots as you progress through AP rewards, so like maybe every 10k you get another title slot, and voila, you know, people get to share these cool things for one another. You build AP, in building that AP you get a bunch of new titles, and eventually you can display another one. I honestly think that would be so cool on both sides. One, I can very much imagine joining like squads off of LFG and having a mouse around to see, you know, the different things people have done and what they're proud of and whatever. But also, like, if this was a thing, there are certain achievements and titles and stuff that I currently just have no incentive for. I know I'd do. Like, I probably would start grinding a lot in the game again. This is sad to admit, but I'd probably start grinding a lot in the game again to get the gold to, like, buy the golden ticket and you know, at least have a gold title, because I don't have one yet. And hey, if I could display it, then brilliant. You know, there's like 4 titles I want all at once on my rev right now, and I'd finally have a space for those. And then when they add more difficult things, you know, more LMs and CMs, hey, we have a space for it. Beyond putting titles on there, there's obviously the achievement point number display itself. I feel like it would be amazing if that had, as I say, a fresh coat of paint in which it just looks a bit fancier and looks a bit better. Specifically what I mean, as you climb AP, that icon that's next to it could be changing and evolving as it goes. So like when you see someone at a big threshold, when they've passed 30k, 40k, 50k, as some people are now, it could be, you know, evolving to look like a shiny Seraph icon or whatever. I think that they did really well in PvP years and years and years ago when they added all the icons. I'll put them on screen for you guys. These are the icons in PvP. Like, this is the bronze, and evolves into the silver, and evolves into gold. Like, there's great artwork, right? If we had something like this as it kept developing, every, like, 10k or whatever, as the AP goes along, maybe it's slightly animated or shiny in some way, I think people would look at it and they'd say, oh, yeah, I really want to actually go for that. I want to look fancier. I want to look cooler. And, you know, I want my number to look better, basically. I know this sounds very superficial and small, but small stuff like this does go a long way, I think. Lastly, with the player cards, so look, a player card is something that, like, a lot of successful games have. They have it as a fully fledged feature. I think actually just giving people new backgrounds that they can unlock during gameplay, pin other kinds of rewards, maybe put a welcome message on there, all sorts. Any of that could be cool, but I would say that's for later. For now, what I really want is the AP display to look cooler, and I want to be able to pin titles on there. I think that'd be awesome. So, feature number 2 that I want to talk about here is guilds. Now, you're going to notice there's a real theme in this video of everything I propose, really, including the section we just did. And that's stuff that encourages community building and socializing. Things that make it clear Guild Wars 2 is populated, there's a lot of people out there doing stuff, help you, like, play with them, help you make friends, and keep old content evergreen at the same time. And so, obviously, guilds are a big thing along that. That's, like, one of my major priorities that I think the game would benefit from most. So, not only do I think strong guild content is just really important for the genre, I mean, it's an MMO, right? Reasons to make friends and do things together is kind of a huge part of it. But it's important for Guild Wars to have, you know, the game with the name Guild Wars to have good guild systems that players actually use. And also, you know, I'm a player who does run 2 large guilds, one for EU, one for NA. We have a huge amount of players. Lots of people message me to join the guild, and it constantly disappoints me that we, like, have so little reason to meet up and to do things together and incentives for it. Like we did in the old days when guild missions were very first added. You know, I feel very guilty that I don't do enough guild missions with people, that we don't run guild missions, that, you know, people join together and what is it? It's just kind of a glorified chat room. There's all these bells and whistles that they added in Heart of Thorns, but what really is happening with guilds now? I suppose there is an argument that doesn't need to do much more, but Arenanet showed with Heart of Thorns they have these cool aspirations. I say, let's play with it. Let's do something for guilds. And I will note that, you know, Janthea Wilds, I suppose, kind of did do something for guilds. The decoration update, that's a system update. It was there in conjunction with the Homestead, but it came for guilds. You know, you can also say World vs. World Alliances had some guild stuff. I'd like more, though, and especially for PvE players. So, back in my Heart of Thorns review, obviously Arenanet did a lot for guilds of Heart of Thorn. I produced a huge amount of ideas for what they'd laid out, where they could expand on it, based on what they had established. But Heart of Thorns went really hard on it initially, but then, just like with Stronghold, also in Heart of Thorns, they basically abandoned it and did I'm not going to say abandoned, they've continued adding decorations, I guess, over the years, but the format has had, like, very little love ever after. I mean, most of the stuff as it exists today around the war room and the decorations and the trader that's in there and stuff, it's all exactly as it was on Heart of Thorns release, right? Ages ago. I mean, how long have we been at a max guild level of 69? Nearly 10 years? I honestly think a lot of what I said with the Heart of Thorns review is still good, but let's go with something really simple. We're talking mini X packs, we're talking feature refinements. So first, let's get something out of the way. Rewards, right? I think that guild missions and, you know, guild content need to have their own good rewards, exclusive rewards, or people won't do it. Full stop. So guild missions were initially an amazing success because they were the way to get ascended accessories. And in the years since, well, that stopped. Why bother with doing time-gated social guild missions or whatever when I can just go collect berries in Bitterfrost Frontier? I mean, Christ, that was early Living World Season 3, and they'd already basically ruined it. There are very few actually good rewards in guild missions that can't be got elsewhere. There's, like, the minis, which are very expensive, but only a few people are going to get invested in that long grind. There's not even, like, a collection for them. You know, for a long time, I had basically every mini in the game except those guild mission minis, and that still wasn't enough for me to get in there and actually start grinding on them. I mean, what else have we got? The Guildhall Merchant, well, just trade stuff you can get elsewhere. The Tenebrous and Shimmering currencies you get from gathering from the Guildhall, well, those again, just like the Zenith and Pinnacle weapons, they look out of date, they're not that good. Arenanet never added any more. For all of these things, players will start doing them again if they're given the incentive. It's really a matter of rewards. That's about it. Yes, a lot of the guild content itself has some jank, and yes, it can be a bit tedious, and yes, could enjoy some polish, but I don't think that's the main issue right now. What should the incentive be? So look, I don't think I need to sit here in this video and dictate that to you. Feel free to imagine what you like. Could it be an exclusive legendary attained just through doing guild missions? Probably like a trinket, so it's applicable to everyone's builds. Could it be a new type of legendary altogether, like legendary infusions? You know, like an infusion that goes in the armory, all your characters get it. It's hot swappable for free. Could it be, you know, an exclusive relic or collection of relics that you can go for? Should it be the best and fastest astral acclaim from the Wizard's Vault? Should there be black line currencies like statuettes, keys, straight up gems? Should there be longer lasting foods, longer lasting utilities than you can get anywhere else? Should it just be large amounts of raw gold or karma or you know, magic find and stuff like that? Take your pick, okay? It doesn't really matter. You're going to have your own personal excitement or disappointment based on your own history with the game. So, you know, who am I to say for that? I'm not really interested in getting lost in the weeds about that. Arenanet just needs to pick something. What I will say is I do think that the reward should be something consumable or spendable, so that it's infinitely exciting to people. The legendary thing is a good idea until people get it, and then people stop interacting with the system again. You don't want that. You want people to always be interested in it. So stuff like statuettes, the long-lasting foods potions, or black line keys, that's most interesting to me. And by the way, look at how crazy people went for key farming. You know, you just attach that to guild stuff as your weekly incentive or whatever. So yeah, things that are always in demand would be my priority, but whatever, right? With the rewards, people will come. Rewards aside, what would be most beneficial for guild stuff? Well, if you've been watching my Guild Wars content over the past few months, you will have heard me talk about this a few times. I noticed that with Secrets of the Obscure and Janthea Wilds, obviously we have the Wizard's Vault. I've noticed how similar the Wizard's Vault is actually to the guild mission UI and guild mission infrastructure. You know, it has its ability to focus on PvE, world versus world, or be a hybrid. Guild missions do that as well. It has an ambition to refresh like weekly objectives, just like the guild missions do. The aims of both UI panels and both of their features are really similar, but the Wizard's Vault has the benefit of not being buried in the guild UI, like under multiple tabs. It has its own button on the top bar. Every player checks it out when they log in. So what I think would be a brilliant idea, I would love to see this, is to marry the two. I would love to see guild missions and guild objective stuff put in the vault in a new tab. In the vault today, we have these three tabs. We've got Astral Rewards, Legacy Rewards, and Objectives. Well, let's add a new tab just underneath Objectives, Guild Objectives. And when you click it, it's the same sort of thing. You can see now, though, not what you personally can do as an objective, but what your guild has as objectives. You know, it can be just like the vault. You can have things you do weekly together, like the rotating missions, and they can even start exploring new ideas, like doing a quarterly thing as a guild together. There are certain things that are a bit too big for a guild mission, would be too tedious. But hey, maybe if once per, you know, for want of a better term, I'm going to use season, we want our guild to go do a meta event somewhere, like a dragon stand, or you know, some kind of festival interaction with your guilds. The works, they could do all these things and just plug them in. At the same time, Arenanet can have a bit of polish over whatever missions are currently available, maybe one or two new ones, but again, I'm not angling so much on the content together. Just fold the systems together. And by having guild missions in the Wizard's Vault, this thing that everyone looks at, I think it will do a lot to get people back into actually doing them. Give them a reward, improve the UI. It's as simple as that. For number 3, I want to talk about world bosses. Okay, look, I know that world bosses are basically really boring content to a lot of people, especially when you're invested enough into the game that you're at the point of watching YouTube videos about it, like right now. I know it's just zerging, press a random few buttons, wait for the boss to die, and whatever. I know in particular, you don't see many people advocating for world bosses, because look, when you get to a certain level, it's about PvP and raiding and fractals and all of that other stuff, which is so much more interesting. I get it. But I do think world bosses are an important part of the game when you're just getting started, especially, and I think that Guild Wars needs to pay attention to people who are just coming in. There needs to be ways to transition new players into the deeper content. You know, when you're just starting with the game, world bosses are pretty cool. You get the spectacle of a shit ton of players around. You get a chance to socialize a bit. The sense the game is really big. You get lots of very varied maps and different boss art, and easy money on top. You know, there's a reason people do world boss trains, and they are always active. You know, it's a very common thing. I think many of us will have felt this. You kind of want to play Guild Wars, but you log in and you don't really know what you're going to do. World bosses are an easy answer to that, if you kind of know what's happening. I want to nurture the world bosses for this reason. So, first, let's talk about the UI. Now, I don't know if you guys have been in the loop with this, but over the past year, Guild Wars 2 Nexus has become a thing. There are some really awesome plugins for Nexus. If you check out the footage in the background, I'll show you one of them. It's the World Boss Timer. This thing is amazing. Wow, it's very elegant. Basically, the idea here is that when you open your world map and you look at the zone, if the zone has a world boss in it, you can see at a glance what that world boss is, and you can mouse over the little UI thing to see when it's next going to be up, or like the current state of the meta event. It is very clever. I mean, it's very simple, really, but the way it affects you when you're in game is incredible. It's the exact same information you would get by alt-tabbing and going to the wiki, if you're a player that knows about the right wiki page, or if you type the command /wiki-et, but again, you have to know about that. A lot of players won't, but way better. It's integrated into the game now. You can just look at a glance at your world map, what is happening. You can scroll out and say, oh, the Shadow Behemoth is up, the Claw of Jormag is up, or even, you know, when it comes to the expansion maps, you can see the Fort Aspenwood. Like, I still need an achievement at Fort Aspenwood, and I always miss it because I don't really know when it's coming up. But now that I've got this plugin, I can keep a very close eye on it. Some maps don't get included because they're not on strict timers, but a huge amount of content now is like very transparently and obviously available just by looking around Tyria. This thing is genius. Some variation of it should be vanilla. Seriously. Now, they went with like pie charts, like circular timers. I think bars would be a bit more fun and fitting to sort of the house style of Guild Wars. And you know, if because it's a plugin, it sort of has all the usual jank and iffiness that you'd expect of an overlay. But even sticking with circular timers, if this was a part of the game, I really think you'd see players doing a hell of a lot more stuff. Like, I think I've got a bit of Karka Queen footage in the background footage for this. I don't know when I last did Karka Queen. It's literally because of the plugin. I did Jakar as well. I mean, Christ, I haven't thought about Jakar for ages, and it's definitely a cool meta event. And now there's a bit of transparency with it. Fantastic. Please, some variation of this, be vanilla. Adjacent to this, I'd also like to talk about TP to a friend. And teleporting to world bosses. So, a few years ago, Arenanet sold these weird items on the gem store for like Heart of Thorns, and I think POF got one as well, that print in your chat when a boss is happening. And they give you the option to teleport for free to the nearest waypoint to that. It was kind of their version of what this Nexus thing does. And in retrospect, I have to say, honestly, I think I hate these things. I think they're terrible items. One of the worst things Arenanet ever could have monetized and sold, because it's now like they have an in real life economic incentive to not improve the user experience around world bosses because they're hoping to sell these things to you instead. But what they sell to you is a million times worse than what I've just been describing in this video. In more recent years, we've got the recharging teleport to a friend, which they started selling, and then there was the buff very recently, so it recharges really quickly now, every 10 minutes. If you guys haven't bought this item off the gem store, you're a second-class citizen in Guild Wars 2. You are missing out big time. It is a huge trap to not have this item. This item will take you to any, not just friends, squad members, for free, into their exact mega server from across the world for free, and it doesn't even put you to the nearest waypoint. It puts you right on top of the player, and the player's going to be on the world boss, so you can tag the boss instantly. You can start fighting. The game today, if you're doing like world boss metas or anything really in squad, in NFG that's actually out there in the open world, which includes all the new stuff in Janthir Wilds and Secrets of the Obscure, the game plays very, very differently if you have the TP to a friend. What you do is you go from nothing to opening NFG, join a squad, double click the item, and then there you go. That's it. You're there. You're right next to Gw2 to tag him, like in seconds before it dies. Gw2 could be on 2% health, and you're standing alone, not in a squad in Divinity's Reach, and you can still get to Gw2 in time and tag it. And it's really, really, really heavy QOL, but I think it's this weird, kind of strange situation where only certain players who are in the know about it get to benefit from it, and it's because they paid for a gem store item. And I know we're kind of in that place anyway with like the infinite bank access and stuff, but I don't know. I'd like to bridge this gap somewhat. I'm not arguing to nerf teleport to a friend, but I'm saying since this is a thing, maybe we can look at some kind of more formal system elsewhere in the game where players can like speak to an NPC in a city, and that will, you know, put them onto a formal world boss train straight away. It will TP them to the nearest boss, they can kill it, and then once that boss is dead, it will take you to the next one as well. Right now, in-game, there's this thing where commanders kind of have to set up these big, elaborate squad messages with a bunch of waypoints, and they're constantly pinging where they want to go next. Let's just remove all that jank. Let's just unify things, and let's have, you know, something formal you can go to in-game to just opt into doing world bosses for a while, and then, you know, the game handles it for you. I think that would be really quite nice and very handy for people. Oh, and lastly, if they're going to do something like that and there's going to be a bit of UI for it, it'd be quite cool if at a glance I can see whether I've already got the world boss, like, daily reward, and then also it would be, consider how good the gold reward is from places like Dragonstorm, right? That should be evident. It should be like, okay, I've just logged into Guild Wars. What do I want to do? Oh, shit, Dragonstorm is up in a second. There's a huge gold reward on it. I can see because I'm mousing over the UI. Brilliant. And that's very good for, like, new players or even just lapsed players who haven't got routines and they might have forgotten about how good stuff that is. And then you're just in and you get to play. You know, it's that whole Guild Wars thing of, let's not be waiting around to have fun. Let's see what the reward is. Do we want to go for it? Click a button and we're going for it, you know? It would be even better, by the way, in terms of rewards if they also showed when you had like an achievement credit as well. Like, oh, if you do this temple in ore, it will also progress your precursor crafting that you forgot about because you initiated it 3 years ago. But yeah, that will give you that extra thing. And then, you know, players will have that added drive to do different things as well. And that's not too crazy. Like, we see that sort of thing through Guild Wars Taco when you put your API key in and whatever. Is it really so crazy to ask for it native to Guild Wars? For feature pack style update number 4, I want to talk about LFG. This is kind of parallel to the world boss discussion, again on the theme of social features. LFG is a huge part of getting people to play together, realizing the things that they can do. The basic structure of LFG in Guild Wars 2 at this point, it had very little thought into it, really. It was released a year after the base game. It's from the Gw2 release, again, over 10 years ago. And I think it could be a lot better. And not just like, oh, it needs to be a huge overhaul. There's some slight tweaks to it that could help it massively. I think it's easy to say, oh, just do an overhaul. But let's be very precise. Here are 4 changes I want for the LFG that would help untold amounts. Number 1, give LFG its own button on the top bar, just like the Wizard's Vault got. It shouldn't be buried in the contacts UI. Everyone should see it easily. They should be able to click to it easily. And by putting it on the top bar, you're also giving it the ability to light up and glow like the other top bar buttons do in various circumstances I'll explain in a second. But yeah, I don't think it fits on the contacts UI. I think it would be easier for new players to see and know about quicker on the top bar. And hell, I'd even give it like one of those, you know, tutorial note pop-ups that probably get spammed a bit too much in the recent expansions, to be honest. But, you know, maybe once every now and then when a new player logs in, if they're not using LFG, or if they get into range of a big meta or something, they get a little pop-up and it says, hey, don't forget LFG is here. You can use that to help you actually play whatever you're trying to do. So, moving on, number 2, clean up some of the categories. There's too many categories for LFG. There were too many categories for LFG years ago. It's too tedious for players to click through all of these mini little subdirectories in order to see which one might possibly have something buried on it. You know, if I'm desperate to do the Death-branded Shatterer or something in the middle of a Living World Season 4 map at this point, I feel really awkward and weird about going to LFG because who the hell is actually browsing and clicking down into such a weird, strange little section? Like, the odds of me getting any visibility are very low, so therefore I don't use it so much, so therefore people don't see stuff when they go there and it becomes this self-perpetuating issue, right? These categories need to be cleaned up. Now, there are many ways that they could condense them. For me, I think the super categories can be very easily shrunk by merging the season into the block of the expansion. So for example, we don't need a separate super category for Heart of Thorns and Season 3. They can be bundled together. Same with Season 4 and Path of Fire. As for the mini ones, look, I don't want to get lost in the weeds here necessarily, because different people are going to have different expectations based on their experiences. You know, I don't want to argue with you guys about whether the role play section is justified and so on, but there are definitely a lot of these that can be shrunk away. And the value of having them shrunk away is the game looks more populated, because when you click into one of these categories, you know, there's a higher chance you'll see something happening, and the lists of things that are happening are that bit longer. Failing condensing the categories together, another solution to this is to add a new super category at the very top, which has like everything. This essentially would be an unfiltered display of all the things that's going on in Guild Wars at this time with the community that you could potentially join. And now, if we think about, like, you know, a random player trying to set up the Death Branded Shatterer off in a random map or a random area, at least he gets visibility in the big category at the top. So one or both of these, I think, would be very, very good for just, again, proving to people that there's a lot happening with Guild Wars and there's stuff that you can join and play around with. Next, something a bit more elaborate and detailed, but I think could be very cool. Now, I just mentioned in the world boss section, opening the world map and actually seeing that a boss is spawning. Well, if they're going to do that, it would be even more brilliant if we could see on the world map if there are squads recruiting for things in that map. For example, I'm on the Silver Waste, right? The Silver Waste doesn't have like an actual formal world boss timer, but let's say I've just thrown on my tag and I've set up a red, indigo, blue, amber. And it's on LFG. Now, if other players could open their world map, when they mouse over the Silver Waste, they see, hey, this character has got a squad and he's recruiting right now. Like maybe a little commander tag icon, and then when I mouse over it or click it, I can join squad. That, just like you do with the mini-map, really. That would also be very, very cool. If I'm on LFG advertising to do something in a certain map, let people see it when they're mousing around. So, you know, when I go and look over at Alona, I see, oh, somebody's actually doing something at the Death Branded Shatterer. Likewise for any other obscure area of the game. And this doesn't have to be related to meta events. If I've decided to roleplay in the Plains of Ashford, people should be able to see that as well, you know, like they'll mouse over on the world map and they'll see that little, you know, each LFG category has its own icon, you know, they'll see the little roleplay icon that's there over the Plains of Ashford. You mouse over, you see that people are wanting to roleplay, and then obviously with that specific example, people are going to come and troll you or whatever, but you get what I mean. If we're doing fishing in Amnoon at Path of Fire or whatever, this stuff would be obvious. And last but not least, another change, very specific change that I'd like to see for LFG, and this one's much more doable than some of the complex ideas I just said there with the world map. But pinning categories. So in other MMOs, when they've got like a party finder feature or whatever, I can set it up so that if something ever gets posted into a specific category like raiding or whatever, then it actually pings me in my chat box and tells me what's up. Remember that world boss gem store item I talked about earlier? It says, hey, people need help for the Chuck Garrett. We should be able to do that for LFG. So what I'm proposing is, in game at the moment, when you look at your achievements, you can click the eyeball and it will track the eyeball. It will track the achievement for you on the top right. Let me click an eyeball on, say, strike missions, or let me click an eyeball in World versus World, or let me click an eyeball in PvP tournaments, wherever you want. And now, if anyone posts something for strike missions or raid training or whatever, it doesn't just, I don't have to sit there staring with LFG open. And remember, LFG closes every time you map swap and stuff. It will post one line in my chat box of whatever, you know, has just appeared on LFG. So now I can see at a glance, you know, even give me a little sound effect if you like. You know, when you get a whisper, it's got a little ding noise. Have that set up there. Now, you might say, well, okay, but isn't that going to get spammy or annoying? Don't forget that LFG, already native to it, allows you to filter information. So if you want to pin the raiding section, but you don't want to see a bunch of cells, you can already filter all of the selling messages out. So those won't get posted to you. While we're at it, by the way, posting it to chat is one idea. If we're just going to eyeball it, like we do with achievements, I mean, Christ, they could pin it on the top right. You can have it pinned up there on the top right, and it will just give you a little feed of a few things that are actually going on in LFG at that moment, so you can always see it at a glance up there as well, allow you to click it and join the group. That, again, would mean if I want to target a specific piece of content, but I need to play other people for, you know, like I've got a weird achievement I want to do in Lion's Arch, that 6 minutes to Nightfall thing, maybe I can keep an eye on LFG there, and at some point in the coming weeks, someone might actually be doing it, and as soon as that happens, boom, I'm ready to go, and I'm in there. LFG could be a lot better. It's so bare bones. Those are the ideas I really care about with that one. So for feature pack style change number 5, I've got kind of a short one here, really. This is kind of just a personal thing of mine. I appreciate it might not apply to too many people. It's kind of a rewards feature thing as well, to be honest. I want to talk about combat tonics. And again, if you guys have been listening to me talk about the game in recent years, you'll know I love these things. So combat tonics first started getting added to the game, if I remember rightly, around Season 3. I think a couple maybe predated it. You know, there was the embiggening and the shrinking tonic. But, you know, full-blown combat tonics are like turn you into a Coden, right? Or turn you into an Awakened, or turn you into Scarlet Briar, or whatever else. You can actually fully fight as. They're great. I love combat tonics, and when they first came in Season 3, particularly I think they were often like heart rewards or meta achievement rewards. I think these are a really, really good idea as a meta achievement reward, like beating the whole patch and getting one. These things are epic. I think they're honestly, or at least during Season 3, one of the best rewards Arenanet ever came up with. I love them. But just as they started hitting their stride and doing interesting things with them, just as we were opening the door to it, Path of Fire swept in, right? Immediately after Season 3. Remember, the updates were coming fast and thick back then. And with Path of Fire came mounts. Mounts, unfortunately, and I don't think Arenanet ever planned for this, mounts just killed combat tonics in a big way, because you can't mount while in a combat tonic. I'm assuming it's because, you know, the animations would all break, or they'd have to put a lot of work into it, or whatever. You can't be a Coden riding on a Raptor, you can't be an Awakened on a Skimmer, and so on. And I can imagine Arenanet not really thinking or paying attention to this, because it doesn't sound like it's the worst thing in the world, but it really is. With the way that mounts were designed for Guild Wars, you're always hopping on and off of them, and it is so cumbersome to get on a mount, dismount, do a fight, dismount, remember to tonic, do the fight, and then as soon as you're out of combat, really, with whatever that is, you're probably gonna immediately mount again. So now you have to detonic, now you have to mount, then you have to get off, then you have to retonic. It's just unworkably bad. Combat tonics, even at the best of times during Season 3, were kind of iffy because they were turning off when you hit loading screens. So here's what I'd like to change, and it really is just based on these interactions. Either let us actually mount on the tonic. That would obviously be the most badass and the best thing. I'd love to be a Coden on a Raptor. But, you know, if that's like impossibly difficult because, you know, the models won't line up or whatever. Like, I remember when the Coden combat tonic first came in, I was playing an Elementalist, I was playing a Tempest. And when I'd overload Earth, it would be bugged. It wouldn't actually work. I assume it's going to be something like that. If that doesn't work, at least give us the treatment that, like, minions and, like, Herald facets got. So, when mounts first came out, if you were a minion monster, you had a ton of minions. When you got on your Springer, they all died. And then when you got off of the Springer, you had to resummon. And that was horrible. And it was the same if you were a Herald. All of your facets were dropped. So Arenanet saw that, and very quickly, as far as those features were concerned, they made them toggle and resummon properly when you got on and off of the mount. That's what we need for combat tonics. If I am, as a Coden, and I choose to get on a mount onto a Raptor, it should decoden me, put me on the Raptor, and then when I leave the Raptor, it should recoden me. Exact same thing that minions and facets got. If that happened, already these things would be a lot more fun to play with. And really, I feel like this should have been like a first quarter POF style update, and we're many years after that now. A secondary element here is the map transition thing. Like, you know, you waypoint into a map, then your tonic drops. You step forward, so you retonic. You step forward to the green starburst. You enter a story instance, the tonic is gone. You leave the story instance, the tonic is gone. You swap map again, it's gone again. You enter LFG, you enter fractals, whatever. Same. So I think, again, if there was a checkbox, either on the novelty UI or just in your general options, saying to, like, auto redrink a tonic when you map swap, that would be amazing as well. And I think this would really revitalize combat tonics. You know, they could release a patch where there's like a Lagos combat tonic, and like it would be like, holy shit, I really want that, and I would accept that as like the meta achievement reward or whatever. I would drink that, assign it to a certain character, and that's how we look. Now, I get it, there is kind of an argument that combat tonics are kind of too good in a way, like they undermine the idea of adding genuine new playable races, but I have to say, guys, I don't really buy that. First, combat tonics can't be customized. You can never change their armors. You can only change their weapons and their backpacks. So there is a bit of customization, but the tone of their skin, their body size, any of that, you know, their face details, you're not going to get any of that customization. So I still think even if they add like a Lagos combat tonic, or we have the Coden ones, if they added the Coden as an actual playable race, you would still find there would be a reason to play it, especially if you consider a new race as like being the content for story with it and voices and all that stuff. You know, we're kind of going into another topic here about whether that's even viable. Let's not get too distracted. But yeah, second, we've been living in the world without playable races for years and years and years now. There's no guarantee they'll ever do them. So let's have some fun with combat tonics in the meantime, right? Like, you could have made this argument back during Season 3, and if we'd listened to it, then we never would have had another combat tonic in all this time since. And that wouldn't have been fun for anyone. So yeah, I'd love just a little bit of a feature tweak and a bit of polish for combat tonics. And then, yeah, start plugging them into things. Christ, put them in as, you know, high-end guild mission rewards or whatever. You know, pair it with some of these other things. So, moving on, for idea number 6 here, we're near the end of the video now. Yeah, I've only got 2 more that I really want to talk about. For number 6, let's talk a little bit about relics. So relics are obviously a fairly new feature. They're, you know, one of the big focuses for the mini X-Pack era so far. Fundamentally, I think relics were a brilliant idea. A great place to give us another facet of buildcraft. They've done really interesting things with legendaries, and you actually unlock the stats, which I think is quite cool. You know, it's not just all immediately given to you. I think it was really fun the way that they kind of opened up runes. You know, there used to be a lot of fun runes, but the attributes weren't perfect with the T6, so now you actually get to control that a little bit. I think relics were a good baseline idea, but I'm kind of disappointed with them, really, guys, that they're not actually that exciting in gameplay for me so far. I actually think they've been a big failure as far as like a reward incentive is concerned. You know, for me, I always think back to like when Heart of Thorns came out, or even Season 1 actually, when new runes got released, or like Viper gear came out and stuff, and they felt like really tangible, cool, horizontal progression things to go for. I want to recapture that. I think relics are basically the best way that they could do that in the game now, but it's not working. So what undermines it for me is that we have such a wealth of relics that already exist, inherited from all the runes that came over from the base game, and now all the new ones that they're adding as well, yet we only have the 1 slot. And because the baseline experience in PvE, especially with PvE, this applies to all the game modes really, but PvE especially is so like based around doing damage a lot of the time. Unfortunately, you know, the actual usable relics that feel fun and feel worthwhile is very minimal. As soon as you like got a taste of running Relic of the Fractal on your Condi build, you know, despite all the diversity that could be there, all the incentive there could be for you to go for other new relics, you just kind of don't care anymore. It's just fireworks, it's Fractal, it's Thief. You know, there's a couple of these mainstay relics that are just old hat. Some of them don't have cool animations or visuals or procs or anything. They're just really, really strong, and we only ever have that 1 slot. So we could try to solve this by going into this game of whack-a-mole, where they keep nerfing. Oh, nerf this one, it's got too many people doing it. Nerf this one, it's got too many people. With a lot of really, really like thorough design work, they could get into a situation where lots of different builds try lots of different relics. So as long as you're character swapping or build swapping a lot, you do sample a lot of them. But I don't think Arenanet's ever really going to get there with that. And I think the process of nerfing to get us to that place, or buffing the other stuff, is going to represent its own problems. People hate nerfs. We also don't really want to trivialize the game too much by, you know, introducing too much power creep, bringing everything onto the level of, say, Fractal or whatever. So what's the best way to fix this? For me, what I would love to see is that 1 relic slot broken into 3. I'm deadly serious. I know it might look even kind of iffy already that we added a whole other slot for the relics. I really think break it into 3 in a very similar way to how amulet enhancements used to work. You guys might not be familiar with the system, but with amulets, you used to have a slot like you could have an offensive amulet or a defensive amulet or a utility amulet. And I argue what we should have is 3 relic slots, and you get 1 of each. You can have an offensive relic, which people are likely just to put, you know, Thief or Fractal or whatever. Something just numbers, something without interesting visuals, something that, you know, just feels kind of required by the meta or whatever, and it's that space for that, okay? Now, if you split that up and you give people a defensive slot as well, well now, you know, because you can't put the really offensive thing in there, people can actually play around with this one, depending on, you know, how high their vitality is, their base class, or whatever they're really kind of looking for. It would be a much more negotiable slot, just fundamentally, which means suddenly the rewards we're getting in the expansions and stuff are that bit more interesting. And so here what I'm talking about is like all those relics that give you like maybe boons on dodge or endurance or stuff like benevolence and so on. And lastly, I do propose a 3rd slot, which again, fundamentally would be negotiable, but the utility slot. And this is where you can find maybe incapacitation effects, like things that proc blinds, enhanced CCs, things like that. Endurance maybe actually is a better fit in here. Movement-related relics, things that actually like are a bit more fancy and you can kind of feel. So with the 3 slots, and 2 of them that are much less, you know, numbersy, and you know, you can actually play around with a bit, suddenly the system opens up a lot more. And the fact that we have so many from base, and they're adding so many with the mini X-Packs as well, is a bit more justifiable, right? The downside, and I do acknowledge this argument, is it's basically a bit more power creep, right? We are giving people more stuff. I don't necessarily like the idea of nerfing the current relics in strength to compensate for the fact that you'll get 3. I think that's going to be a bit lame. And obviously there would be real wrinkles and kinks to work out for PvP and World versus World. Maybe you do still just get the 1 relic slot, because there it is much more negotiable anyway. But as far as like PvE power creep, I mean, Christ, guys, look at what the game is like now. I think I've got some Ara footage in the background in this video. There's an insane amount of it as it is. I would argue for improving the RPG, like on a fundamental level first, and then, you know, later down the line, we can do some kind of a stat squish or some kind of like improvement to some of those earlier formats that are getting a bit power crept, if that's really what's called for. And with that, I think I'd be much, much, much happier with relics. As a side note, one final extension to this idea, and I want to talk about this as a bit of a separate thing, because it's even more excessive, really. But if we do go into this idea of like multiple slots, there is another way in which you could break them down. It does occur to me that quite often there are like the raw numbersy sort of relics that have no intrigue about them at all. Like just hit an enemy in the flank, or, you know, just like randomly it will keep proccing. There's no visuals, there's nothing to it. And then there are more interesting ones. Of particular note are like use an elite skill to drop a puddle, or enemies explode when they die, or, you know, is it the Relic of Ceres? You can actually create Ceres's wall on elite. Those ones are fun, and I'd love to carve out some space for those. So maybe a breakdown where it's like, okay, you've got like your passive relic, like truly passive, where it's just kind of numbers, but then also maybe an active relic where we have a specific designated place for anything with some kind of a fun proc thing. You do run into a risk here where, once again, it's going to be quite easy mathematically to break down one of those as a best in slot thing, but carving out a space for it could be fun. And one final place that carving out a space could be fun as well is with the idea of a class relic. So what I mean by that is, look, there are the class runes, right? There's the rune of the Guardian, the rune of the Revenant, the rune of the Elementalist, and then there's all the elite spec ones as well, the Deadeye relic, the Tempest relic, and so on, where these now have very specific application for like certain categories of skills. Having a dedicated slot where I can definitely put that in would also be very cool. When you play lots of different classes and different specs, you're definitely going to be flexing that slot now, and you get to play with that extra synergy. And then there's also, if they do that, there's a really cool idea of kind of getting back to cross-profession stuff. Maybe I want to play a Berserker that's using, you know, a Tempest relic or whatever, so we're kind of a Berserker Tempest-y kind of feeling thing. I feel like there's a lot of good flavor and good vibes with that as well. So again, a dedicated slot for that would be brilliant. Just this fundamental idea of give me some more relic slots, assign them in some fun ways, and I think there's a huge amount of like untapped design space there that would be very fun, and again, give more space for relics as rewards. Right now, in Janthir Wilds and Secrets of the Obscure, I'm getting the relics, but honestly, literally just to finish the collections and get a bit of AP from them, and that feels like a real shame. I want gameplay meaning behind them. Right now, they may as well just be more minis or skins or titles that I'm never going to use anyway, because I'm already completely swarmed with rewards that I got years prior that I care about more. And finally, we reached number 7. This is my last little thing that I'd like to see. This is kind of a tack on, to be honest. I made this video and I was playing the game like 2 days ago, and I thought, you know what? I really want to talk about this as well. So one final thing, let's talk about squad UI. Again, same kind of thing, socializing, getting people together. Basically, what I'm thinking about here is making life a bit easier for commanders so that more people want to be commanders, so there's more parties and things going around, and we see a broader range of content being played. So, Squad UI is pretty good, to be honest. I think it's one of Guild Wars 2's stronger UI features. A couple of things would go a very long way, though. I don't know how viable or feasible putting some of this stuff in actually is. But first of all, renaming subgroups. Oh my god. Okay, I'll put a screenshot on screen here. This, you see, 1, 2, 3, 4. I want to be able to rename these. It would be insanely handy if a commander can just call one of these subs Alacrity, or another one Quickness, or another one Heals, or if we're raiding, maybe we call one of them Flak, or Pylons, or whatever, right? So there's a thing at the moment where quite often if you join a big squad, say you're going to do Convergence CMs or whatever, This could count for a huge amount of things. The commander will start off in the squad UI. They will say, hey, can you move yourself to sub 3 if you're quickness? Can you move yourself to sub 2 if you're alacrity? Or whatever. And basically, the players have to open the commander has to set this up. Then the players have to actually go in, look at what it is, and assign. And people always forget to, or the number isn't quite right, or whatever. It'd be so much easier if the commander himself could rename those subs. So for me, as soon as I join, I can see, all right, do I go into the DPS subgroup? Do I go into this? Do I go whatever? And then he can assign me from there. That alone would be brilliant. And it would facilitate, like, some of the more complicated, annoying raids. Some raids are, like, not hard necessarily, but they have a lot of very specific roles that need to be assigned. Like I mentioned with pylons there. Again, this would help with that a lot. Secondly, and this would be even better, but I think even less likely that they might be able to do it, the best thing would be able to pre-assign each square, each player slot in the squad UI before players are even in it. Like, so for example, if I make a squad and I want 50 players for my Convergent CM, I will already see all 50 squares there. They don't have players loaded into them, but it's all 50 squares there already, and I can assign a little icon or a 3-letter tag of my choice into each box. So I can already have all my subgroups set up, and I can say this one needs an alacrity, this one needs a quickness, this needs DPS, this needs DPS, this needs DPS, or whatever. And once I've got all of that pre-assigned, as players filter in from LFG into like sub-0, I just drag them in. I, as the commander, can do it all. I can just say, okay, where are you, where are you? And the player, on the player's end, when I join a squad on LFG, I can see, okay, I'm playing DPS, but he's got me assigned to quickness. I can see the icon there, and I now know to let the commander know that I can't do that, or to swap my builds, right? There will be so much more clarity on exactly what people are doing. Right now, there's a very common thing in game where you go in there, you're supposed to be receiving a boon, but oh, it turns out the guy that, you know, the mechanist that was in your group that everyone thought was alacrity actually isn't. That wouldn't be a problem anymore if we could assign icons to the boxes in Squad UI so that people knew, you know, immediately what they were supposed to be doing. As a final little tack on, if there is going to be this thing where we can pre-assign, you know, the squad makeup, if that could just be saved, like, as a template, how it's set up, if I can just save that locally onto my hard drive, that would be amazing as well. Let's say I'm a commander that is going to do a bunch of raids. Well, all I have to do now is just hot sort. Okay, this is my squad set up for, you know, Wing 1 or Encounter 1 in Wing 1. And then this is how we want it to look for when we're at Kadim. This is how we want it to look for when we're at, you know, Sabbatha. And it will just swap it around quickly. People could share and recommend different templates online as well, so you can just quickly download them. Oh my God, that would be so cool. And it would make a lot of this stuff very, very, very smooth. So there you go, guys. That's some of my thoughts for feature changes, feature refinements, UI updates that I think would really benefit Guild Wars. And if, over the next few mini-X packs, we see they hammer away or even do some stuff somewhat similar to this, I would be very, very, very happy. We'll see what they do as the new year goes along. I'd love to hear what ideas you guys have. For me, if Arenanet can, like, nail this area of the game, I think after that, I would start looking at rewards in a bigger way. Obviously, I've talked a little bit about rewards here, but, you know, these are kind of fundamental things, I think, for now that would be my main priority. And, yeah, what can I say? It's just been really good to be back into Guild Wars, working through all the old Secrets of the Obscure achievements, you know, finishing up Janthir Wilds. I've been having a lot of fun. Thanks very much for watching, guys. I'm available in Discord. Don't forget to open the description. There's a huge amount of socials. I'm on Blue Sky now as well. I stopped tweeting for years, but I've actually been fairly active on Blue Sky, so feel free to follow me over there. And, yeah, I'll see you down in the comments, guys. Thanks very much for watching. Have a happy new year. Oh, I'll note as well, I feel like I need to remind people of this. I've been very active the past few months, but you have to click the live tab on YouTube to see the stuff I've been doing. I've had a few Guild Wars projects, but I've been playing PoE. I'm currently back in Final Fantasy X. There's been 14 content coming out. Please do consider watching it. And I'll have more news about that stuff in a channel update coming in the following days. Sort of a 2024 retrospective kind of thing. You guys might find that interesting as well. Again, thanks for watching.